Kevin Durant was famously caught using a Twitter burner account to defend himself. Skip Bayless was seen complimenting himself and his own Facebook account. But to be the burner GOAT, you have to commit to your fake accounts like your life depended on it. Introducing Bryan Colangelo, the man who defended himself with 5 anonymous accounts, leaked private team info, and got caught for all of it. This is a ClutchPoints original on the insane quintuple burner story of the Philadelphia Sixers ex-GM. In April 2016, Sixers GM and president of basketball operations Bryan Colangelo inherited a mess. The team had just finished a miserable 10-72 season, second worst in franchise history. Throughout the next season, it was more of the same. The culture was unprofessional, the players were used to losing, and the fans grew restless. Colangelo faced intense criticism from both the media and fans. He chose not to fight back, publicly at least. But in February of 2018, The Ringer got an anonymous tip on 5 Twitter accounts that could be run by Bryan Colangelo himself. Ben Dietrich, who worked for The Ringer, got a DM on both Instagram and Twitter from the same anonymous source. The source noted they worked in artificial intelligence and used an open source data analysis tool to link these 5 Twitter accounts through commonalities. The accounts were Phila12345667, AlVic40117560, Honesta341971118, Enough Unknowns 01, and S. Bonhams. With the exception of Phila12345667, which had only a couple of tweets, the other accounts all shared criticism of certain Sixers players, criticism of Sam Hinkie and Toronto Raptors president Masai Ujiri, and disclosure of private information about Sixers players. The anonymous source said they thought about posting their findings on Reddit and letting the public investigate, but wanted to have a formal story published instead. So Dietrich took a closer look. He asked the Sixers directly about 2 of the accounts, Eric Jr. and Phila12345667. The Sixers responded by saying that Colangelo admitted to running the mostly dormant Phila12345667 account, but had nothing to do with Eric Jr. Despite Dietrich not mentioning the other 3 accounts to the Sixers at all, those other 3 went private within hours. Dietrich double-checked with the Sixers representative to make sure this info wasn't broadcasted in the whole organization. It wasn't. Only Colangelo was asked about it. Just hours later, things got more sus. Still Balling unfollowed 37 accounts with ties to Colangelo, including some of his son's college basketball teammates, a former coach from his son's high school, and an account allegedly belonging to Warren Legary, Colangelo's former agent. In fact, all 5 accounts followed Legary at one point in time. A closer examination of the accounts followed revealed more intimate ties to Colangelo. Eric Jr. was the oldest account, created in April 2016, the same month Bryan Colangelo joined the Sixers. Among its followers were Sixers front office members and players from the University of Chicago men's basketball team. Colangelo's son, Madia, played for the University of Chicago at the time. Eric Jr. even retweeted a post that praised Madia as a great student athlete but an even better person. Another retweet was from a post by DeMar DeRozan saying that Bryan Colangelo's swag was always on 100. Eric Jr. also followed a man named Lawrence L.B. Bain. The seemingly random Bain was listed as being in Paradise Valley, Arizona, just 5 miles from the address of a financial company where Jerry Colangelo, Bryan's dad, was a partner. Bain was also followed by Phila12345667, which was confirmed at the time to be run by Bryan himself. Another major link connecting the accounts was their criticisms of former GM Sam Hinkie and Toronto Raptors president Masai Ujiri. The Enough Unknown Sources account referenced Hinkie's 13-page resignation letter, saying, "I could not get past the first page." The account also attacked Hinkie's reputation. This from November 2016. "I have no respect for Hinkie's martyrdom because it is orchestrated by him behind the curtains via all the bloggers he cultivated with leaks." Eric Jr. got in on the fun as well, saying in January 2017 that Hinkie had great pieces but couldn't make the puzzle work. Another favorite target of the accounts was Raptors president Masai Ujiri. Colangelo originally hired Ujiri in Toronto as director of global scouting back in 2007. After a stint in Denver, Ujiri then came back in 2013 to be the Raptors' general manager, replacing Colangelo. Eric Jr. suggested that the Raptors were only successful because of players Colangelo had acquired, Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan. The account noted the Raptors were falling apart and were coasting on trust fund money. After Ujiri signed a massive extension in 2016, Eric Jr. begged Ujiri to do something to make him worth the $30 million he was signed for. Outside of common criticisms, sometimes the damning evidence was just based on sheer geography. On February 10, 2017, Eric Jr. randomly tweeted about the Delaware 87ers, the Sixers developmental league team. "I hope the Sevens rise up with different uniforms and not the one they are wearing tonight. It hurts my eyes to look at them." Later that day, the 87ers Twitter account posted a photo of Bryan Colangelo at the game joining the broadcast team. This was the only time the 87ers account ever mentioned Colangelo, and this was the only time any of the 5 mystery accounts mentioned the 87ers. In the same month, actress Gabrielle Union criticized Tom Brady for not visiting Obama in the White House. Eric Jr. replied to Union saying, "I sat next to you and Dwayne Wade at Beijing Olympics and saw you both being rude and nasty to a little kid fan. Had to eat your pizza. You showed no respect to this little kid. Who are you to stand on high grounds?" In 2008, during the Beijing Olympics, Jerry Colangelo was the managing director of the U.S. men's basketball team. Jerry was in Beijing, and Bryan was spotted at the games in 2008 too, although it was unconfirmed if he was ever in a restaurant with Gabrielle Union and Dwayne Wade. The evidence mounting against Colangelo seemed a little too obvious. At one point, someone on Twitter jokingly replied, "This you, Bryan?" Enough unknown sources responded by saying, "No, but thanks for the compliment. He is too classy to even engage. Worked with him. He is a class act." Defending and complimenting yourself wouldn't be career-ending, but leaking information would be. On May 20th, 2017, ahead of the draft, Still Balling liked a tweet that had the trade idea of the Sixers sending the number 3 overall pick and the 2018 Lakers pick to Boston in exchange for the top pick in the draft, who was projected to be Markelle Fultz. That trade ended up actually happening, and Colangelo may have been releasing the Sixers' actual draft strategy without anyone knowing at the time. Earlier, in February of 2017, with the trade deadline looming, the Sixers were ready to deal center Jahlil Okafor. The Sixers even held him out of 2 games in February amidst trade rumors. Most of the time, when a player is held out of a game, it's a clear sign they're getting traded. On February 12th, Eric Jr. replied to Brian Jacobs, a writer for a Sixers blog. The original tweet was of a Kentavious Caldwell-Pope highlight, but Eric Jr. randomly referenced the potential Okafor trade. "I must be nuts. I cannot sleep because I worry Ja will not pass physical exams and sent back." The next day, Jacobs tweeted out a potential trade involving Okafor. Eric Jr. once again replied saying, "I feel it in my bones. Deal was done and Ja did not pass physical. Let's wait and see. Only possibility at this point." The account also tweeted that Keith Pompey, a Sixers beat writer, asked Ja if he passed other teams' physical. Okafor rejoined the Sixers a few days later after not being traded. From then on, Eric Jr. and the other accounts tweeted ominously about a failed physical preventing the trade from happening. Eric Jr. went so far as to push Jacobs to ask for an interview to get the Sixers to talk about the supposed failed physical. In addition to Okafor, another piece of seemingly leaked information was on young center Nerlens Noel. Noel, who the accounts described as a selfish punk, was traded for a modest return, and Colangelo received criticism for it. Enough unknown sources asserted that Coach Brett Brown wanted Noel gone and that Noel was bad for the locker room. Also casually adding that Colangelo was not a bad guy and a class act. The next season, with Noel riding the bench from the Mavericks, Still Balling dropped a surprise piece of info never heard anywhere else. Do you remember how Noel elected to have hand surgery at the beginning of the season? Then he went down south to rehab, did not stay with team and teammates, and was caught playing laser tag instead of being careful. That detail about Noel's social life of playing laser tag against team wishes had never been reported by anyone anywhere. More information came in on 2017 top pick Markelle Fultz. In Fultz's rookie year, he deteriorated. He couldn't find his shot while only playing 17 games all season due to injury. As a result, Colangelo faced more heat over his handling of Fultz's injury. But the accounts told a different story. They attacked Keith Williams, Fultz's longtime family friend and trainer. Still Balling wrote in a reply, the so-called mentor tried to force him to change the shot. Tapes have surfaced of the guy making Markelle shooting while sitting on a chair, while on his back on the floor, etc. The guy denies it as doesn't want to say why it was forced out of kid's life, why nobody reports this. Joel Embiid was also a frequent target of the accounts. Embiid was described as a bit lazy and a big selfish baby by the accounts. How the Sixers GM handled Embiid's injury was another point of criticism. Already with a minor meniscus tear, Embiid played in the game around the 2017 All-Star break. The injury needed surgery and eventually ended his season. With Colangelo facing more pressure, the accounts alleged that Embiid actually hid the injury from the doctors and asked to play in that game. Adding fuel to the fire, while Embiid was recovering from the injury, he attended a Meek Mill concert and danced shirtless. Eric Jr. pounced on the opportunity. Too bad that Embiid danced like a fool when the whole disaster happened. Next time he will think twice before mocking his team. In another post in February 2017, Eric Jr. took the offensive. If I were management, I would step on a ladder and kick his butt. A strange connection between the accounts. In November 2017, enough unknown sources used similar phrasing and got in on the ladder talk. If I had a medium-sized ladder, I would love to knock some sense in Joel's head right now. He is playing like a toddler having tantrums. Compiling all of this, Ben Dietrich's breaking news story on The Ringer was published on May 29, 2018. It set the NBA world on fire. Colangelo himself resigned from his position as GM on June 7th amidst the Twitter scandal. After an investigation by the NBA and a law firm, Colangelo's wife Barbara Bottini was found to be running the other 4 accounts and leaking sensitive information online. True to form, in a Twitter mystery story, it was a tweet that first connected Bottini to the accounts. The account Did the Sixers Win? Found that the recovery phone number for 3 of Colangelo's alleged burner accounts ended in 91, and found elsewhere that Barbara Bottini's personal number also ended in 91. The NBA and the third-party law firm confirmed those suspicions, giving us the most hilarious NBA scandal in the modern era. The internet may seem anonymous, but 140 characters can cost you your job. Just ask Brian Colangelo. Note, all quotes are direct quotes from Twitter posts. All misspellings and grammar errors were part of the tweet. Credit goes to The Ringer for all tweets in quotes.